I'm scared to death of this charm bracelet, so I've got a timer. I'm Bryan Strawser, chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, the state-level gun rights group in Minnesota. And those of you that might know Minnesota, we call it the land of 10,000 lakes. We have about 50 versions of the Lutheran Church, the busiest state fair in the United States, a lot of funny accents. I'm not from there originally, so I don't quite sound like my wife. But we also have the nation's only divided legislature, the only divided state legislature. In the Minnesota House, the Democrats, who we call the DFL, the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, and that's a long story you can find on Wikipedia, they're not the Democrats of 10 years ago, and they have a 20-seat majority over the Republicans right now. This majority is a progressive, anti-gun group who is based in the Twin Cities metro area, who ran on every form of gun control you've heard other panelists talk about this morning. Our governor, former Congressman Tim Walz, who's from rural Minnesota, where Democrats traditionally supported gun rights. Until he ran for governor, he was an A-rated, NRA and every other group endorsed individual with a 100% voting record. But he wanted to be governor of Minnesota. So now you would think he'd been a gun control activist his entire 25-year political life. He'll sign any bill that they put up in front of him. In the Minnesota Senate, we have a 2-seat Republican majority. It was 1 seat, but we won a special election and took a seat from an anti-gunner. And you would, I'm sorry, the anti-gun groups looked at this going into 2019 and said, well, Minnesota could be the proving ground for compromise. And they thought that because in 2018, 2 Republicans signed on to a universal background check bill in the Minnesota Senate that didn't go anywhere. They both pulled their names off of that bill before the end of session because when groups like ours send 10,000 letters to your constituents and you're a family practice doctor and your neighbors and friends come in not because they need help for the medical issue, holding a letter saying, why are you supporting this? You take your name off that bill. But they thought, hey, if we can get 2 Republicans to flip, I mean, we just did this, and after all, we're the state that elected Jesse Ventura governor. We could do this. Bloomberg's Everytown and the Giffords organization outspent us in the last election, us and the NRA, who spent on some state races 14-1. They spent about $1.4 million to get that progressive House majority. We spent less, a lot less. So as the legislative session started, they had a strategy, and I'll give them credit, this was unique. They only pushed 2 bills, universal background checks and the red flag gun violence restraining orders. They didn't introduce anything else they campaigned on, assault weapons bans, magazine restrictions, licensing, just 2 bills, and they held the line on that for the entire session. Now I'm going to jump to the end of the story about the session because I don't want to talk about the play-by-play. I want to tell you what we did that worked, that put a stop to this. I'll tell you that our allies in the state Senate held the line the entire session and didn't cave. In fact, they didn't get a single Republican to support any of their bills in the House or Senate. They did it with no Democrat support, almost no Democrat support from greater Minnesota, from rural Minnesota, because they all voted our way. And the Senate, when the bill came over, the 2 bills came over, they looked at it and they said, wow, that's a pretty looking bill. I'm just going to put it right here on the table, and I'm going to look at it for the rest of the year. There were no hearings, there were no committee votes, there was nothing else that happened. So how did we do this? The most important thing we did is we got our grassroots army, our activists, folks like you and I and everyone else that supports gun rights, to come down to the legislature, to show up at hearings, to pressure their legislators, to go to town halls, to ask hard questions, send emails, make phone calls, bring their neighbors, talk with people at their gun clubs, and do the same thing. And we used the platform Voter Voice to do this. You can see that in action at gunowners.mn/action, but I think any of your groups would be able to do something like that. If an anti-gun politician or a gun control activist had a meeting, we had a tracker there, audio, video. We turned that into Facebook memes. We posted their audio. We put their facts, their BS facts, by the way, out where people could see it. So we tried to externalize that as much as we could. Our political director, Rob Dorr, who's our lobbyist, was at the Capitol every single day, whether there was something going on or not, answering questions, helping legislators talk to their constituents, and Rob deserves an enormous amount of credit for winning this victory with us. We hosted a lobby day with more than 800 attendees from across the state. Ironically, and I don't think he planned this, the Maine Senate anti-gun senator introduced his gun control bill that day, had a press conference. As he was walking out, we walked in. We had our own press conference about his bill. So even before his message got going, we countered that with facts and were able to push that forward. We also worked a lot on new media, so things like using Facebook Live, using YouTube Live, and related things to get to those younger folks that we want to have at the table for this. But most importantly, we won this because our allies held the line and our grassroots army forced them and helped them and had their backs when they did. Thank you.